Welcome back to the Artefactors Union. I am your host and foreman, Douglas Scoundrels. Today we are assembling the Molly Core box. My wife's favorite character. Anyways, box is a typical core box. You've got a master, a totem, a henchman, and 3 minions. Alright, I apologize. Let's look at our artwork. We got Molly, Philip, and the Nanny, which is our henchmen. One of the Rabble Risers, the minions, and the Necrotic Machine, our totem, and probably the hardest model in this box. Our renders are as such. Molly here with the flowy skirts, Philip and the Nanny being a head and a pram. Necrotic Machine without the bow, which is on the artwork. And Rabble Risers. Let's look at the sprue. Sprue kind of looks complicated at initial blush, but looking at the instructions, there's not a ton of bits here. Biggest headache is almost definitely going to be the Necrotic Machine. We got Molly here with like 5 bits. Goodness. Philip and Nanny, a few more. Yeah, this is going to get complicated. The Rabble Risers are also pretty simple, so let's start with the easy one, Molly. Here is our best Riser girl, Molly. And typical assembly, we're going to grab the body and the big part of the skirt. There are no legs. Okay. We'll do each of the arms. Right arm, left arm, and then her hair pomp is what I'm going to call it. Alright? So start with F2 and F3. I apologize, the legs were in the skirt the entire time. F2. And add F3. Do not stare at her butt. She is a cinnamon roll. How dare you? Let's do the right arm F1. Apologize, F1 is her left arm, so let's put it in the right spot. Alright, there's the left arm. Angle, you're probably going to just need to reference the render to make sure it's pretty accurate. Also, be really careful trimming the flash off the magic effects. It's thin enough that you could snap it off if you're not careful. Alright, now let's do F4, which is actually the right arm. You know, it's a small connection point, but it sits in pretty solidly. I'm happy with these arms that they're not going to immediately snap off or get bent out of the shape with a nudge, which is great. Okay, F5 is our last bit, which is her hair pomp. Okay, nearly impossible to see, but if you look closely, you can see that the connection point sort of pokes in at a specific angle, which is basically that direction. I'm doing with the knife. And conveniently, the hair bit has an asymmetrical connection point that is pointing in a specific direction. So this little nub here should be going in the direction I pointed on her head. Okay, it matches the render, so I'm going to call it good. It's just weird looking as far as its positioning goes. But again, you can just look at the connection point and make sure there isn't any very obvious gaps, which it's filling in that hole here. So we're going to call her good, get her on a base. Molly Squidpiddge is done. The hardest part was the hair pomp. Yeah, just orientation seemed a little weird, and I realized she's moving around, and magic is maybe kicking up some wind, so also her hair never really behaved correctly anyways. Yeah, beautiful sculpt, better than second edition. Really excited to see her painted up. Okay, let's move on to the totem. Okay, for starters, let's get a few things out of the way. There are technically a couple optional bits on this sprue. Optional in that you technically don't have to put them on the model, but I would be very upset if you didn't, because they build character, and I've been waiting an edition for this bow to show up. Anyways, this bow is one of them, and will go on the head of the Necrotic Machine, as well as this bird's nest, which is in 2 pieces, which should go between the 2 big canister things sticking out of its back. The render on the back of the box does not have these pieces. However, the instructions do, and as well as the artwork on the front of the box. So keep that in mind. We'll do them last. All right. Let's start with building the base body. So we'll include the spine, I guess. We'll do the spine, and we'll add the 2 halves of the torso under that. So clip out A13, A10, and A9. Really careful clipping and trimming these bits because those tubes are thin and could break or snap and bend out of place easily. Take this mechanical vulture gas pump thing and hold it like this. This is it being upright. And we'll add A10 the right side. Kind of a cool way for it to integrate the 2 bits together. This is what it looks like from this side. Now let's do A9, the left side. And here we have the full body. And let's look at the back just to be safe. Okay, we're going to now work our way up from the bottom, so we'll start with the one of the sets of legs, I guess. Okay, so these reverse knee, like bird legs, are going to be first. Our right leg is going to be A14 combined with A12, and our left leg is going to be A15 combined with A2 or A3. One sec. Looks like we don't have... We've got 16 bits and 15 of them are labeled, so we'll call this one A16. But the one that's obviously a foot, I guess. Change of plans, folks. That looks like it is a pretty weak connection point, and I think we can do better to start off with. So the goal is going to be, we're going to add the 3rd leg that goes right here, because it is also touching the ground, and this is a lot more solid of a connection point than the hips here. Once that's down, we can put our thigh here and the foot, and then reference where that foot touches the ground to make sure our leg is oriented correctly, and then we can do that for the other side. So we are going to, in fact, put in A4, this bit right here. We're going to put it right there. Okay, there is barely a seam there, so I'm pretty confident that is exactly the angle we need. Now we can tell how his body is supposed to angle, because that claw is supposed to be sitting flat on the ground, which will help us position our back legs and make sure they are correct. Now, another change we're going to do is that we're going to combine the 2 pieces of the legs first, because we're going to be doing some fiddling, and I'd rather us not have to refiddle the hips after we put the legs on, which might knock them out of place. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and combine bits A14 and A12, I believe it was. A14. There are our combined bits, and also hopefully our flat foot. To reference, make sure you've got it correctly, because it's a small connection point. You can look back here and make sure this is a nice upside down U shape with there not being much of a seam. Okay, now let's add this onto his hip joint. Okay, there we have the leg attached finally. Let's not mess with it too much, because it's a very thin connection point, as stated before. Once that's more cured, we can add the other leg. We'll still combine the 2 bits, because we can do that without touching the body. Our bits, again, being A15, and then this unnamed bit I decided to call A16. A15, and add A16. Again, that U shape should be nice and clean and even. Guarantee that it's good connection. So let's add this to the model now. Update, I think gluing them down to a base, something I on rare occasions suggest on this channel, it's a good idea here, because then you can just make sure that this is flat against the bottom and then just leave it, because it'll be good. So now let's add that other leg. Alright, there's the hips. Got a pretty wide stance, but all 4 feet are on the ground, which is I gotta call a win. Let's continue on with the rest of the model, which should be a little bit easier. This way. Our other front leg now, I guess? I assumed that the syringes would be considered legs. Limbs, maybe? Whatever. So I guess it'd be the front leg or front arm. The 5 there is going to go right on there. There we go. Use the tube on the shoulder as a reference to make sure that seam is nice and clean. But we're done with the regular limbs. So let's get started on the syringe arms and the cylinders on his back. To do one side at a time. I apologize, I clipped out A6 before recording this, but A6 is going to be the syringe arm on the Necrotic Machine's right side, and A2 is going to be the cylinder on that side. We're going to try adding A6 first, and then immediately follow it up with A2. The instruction says that they're connected, and I'm not sure they actually are or not, but I think doing them together then, if they are connected, would be easier, because it's not the most solid connection point on these bits. So if we can solidify that sooner, I would rather do that. So let's add A6 and then A2. A6 is going to go right in here. Make sure it is pushed up as far as possible to fill in this gap. There we go. I found the best way to fill in or close that seam right there is to actually sneak in a knife or a small pokey stick and then pry it upwards, and that'll get to stick to the carapace up here. But now let's do A2, our cylinder. Okay, it doesn't connect to the syringe arm, but that's not an issue. I think doing one side at a time is perfectly okay in this situation. So you can see that it connected up here, and that it connects the tube down here near the back. Also, there is a gap there, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be there. Let's do the left side now. Our syringe arm is going to be A7, and our cylinder is going to be A11. There's our left syringe arm, same with the right. Get in there, you can stare inside there and almost see the gap. It's kind of hard to do that on my camera. Make sure that's closed off by pushing down this way, and then to get it up against the carapace again, just reach in there with a knife and pry it upwards. Now let's do the canister. Canister is on. Tube connects the exact same way that the other canister does, and there is also that small gap on the back that is intentional. Now, we could end here if we are cowards, and by God, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, we are not cowards here at the Artefactors Union. So we're going to go ahead and add ourselves a bird nest and a bow. First up, the bird's nest, A1 and A3, I guess. You can see the connection point on this side, that's half the nest, and it will connect to the connection point over here, this side of the bird's nest. So let's combine the nest bits first. A1 and A2. See the seam on the bottom. Alright, let's figure out how to put this on our Necrotic Machine. Okay, since the model is designed for these to be optional, there's no obvious connection point. However, if it's going to be sitting on him, it's probably going to be balanced, so it's the sort of thing that wouldn't immediately fall off in reality. So sitting right here is probably a good spot, and the instructions have the bird that is hatched facing this way. So that's how we're going to do it. I did not get the orientation of the bird correct. There is a particular curve to the bottom of the nest, so there's going to be a specific way it'll sit so that there's not big gaps between it and the back of the Necrotic Machine. So there's the nest, sitting nice and easy on the back, and now we can do the bow, the last bit, which is A8, and that'll just go on Ponto's head. And there we go. I just moved it around until I found a placement that I liked, and the seam was pretty good. Yeah, I'll call that alright. I'm pretty sure you can place it sort of anywhere on what would be the forehead. I did mine slightly askew, which is somewhat implied by the instructions, but also I just think it's cute. We are done. Well, he's already in a base, isn't he? The Necrotic Machine, aka Ponto, is done. Hardest part was the legs. It seemed pretty obvious. Getting them to stay together and flat on the ground would have been impossible if we didn't have that front left leg to sit on the ground first. The syringe arms weren't too terribly easy either, but really, yeah, the biggest pain was the back legs. Right, okay, let's move on to the henchman. Alright, Philip and the Nanny, going to be slightly easier than the last model. We will build the entirety of the pram and then the Nanny and then combine the two on a base. So we'll clip out the back of the pram first. Then we will go ahead and add the lollipop, which is right here. After that, we'll cut out the sort of hood of the pram. I'm not sure what the term for that is. And then we'll glue Philip's head to the inside of that. Then that combined piece will attach the top of the pram. We'll go ahead and turn it over. We'll add the framework for the wheels, each side of the wheel after that. And then the pram is done. And the Nanny is just body, head, and arms. And then we'll combine the two bits. Or two whole things. Yeah, whatever. So we'll start with B6 and then B3. Note for B3, you want to clip like right here because this little block is actually part of the connection point. It'll go in right here. So don't clip it too far up towards the stick of the lollipop. Here is B6. B2 is going to go in this hole like I showed earlier. It has a bit of a lean to it. You want it leaning out towards the edge of the pram, so towards this way. Alright, there we go. Now let's set that aside and grab ourselves B7. Here's B7, which is the hood of the pram. Next, we're going excuse me. I'm going to do B2, which is Philip's head. And the back of his head is going to glue right on there. Okay, there we go. He's in there. The seams looks good. So now let's add him into the pram. That piece will just fit right along here, and Philip will have his neck glued right there. Okay, there is Philip tucked gently inside of his pram. I'm sure he's having a blast. But that's pretty much it for this, the main body of the pram, but we got to give it some wheels. So if we look at the bottom, you can see a bar-like connection point and 2 dots. Going to the sprue, we look at B5. That's not really noticeable here, but if we flip it over, you can see a bar-like connection point and 2 dots. So that's how we're going to fit it under the pram. Okay, there it is attached to the bottom of the pram. Didn't show this on the sprue, sadly, but it's really kind of hard to tell what part the bit is the bit and what part is the sprue right here on these 2 connection points. There is just the slightest bit of difference in the shape of it, so just keep that in mind. Don't cut off too much. But now we can do the wheels. B9 is going to be the right side of the right wheels of the pram, and B10 is going to be the left wheels of the pram. B9 is going to connect to the spokes of the frame we just added. There we go, big wheel is up in front, and do the same on the other side with B10. Alright, due to how small those connection points are, they're a little bit wobbly, but that's good because we'll need to get the handle into those 2 holes. So we're done with the pram for now. Let's go ahead and build ourselves a Nanny. Let's start with B4 the body, then B8 the head, and then B1 the arms. B4, B8, seam looks good, and B1 our arms. Alright, arms are in. A couple things. One, be careful trimming the connection point on the handle. If you put a little too much pressure on both arms, like squeezing them together, you'll get this awful break bend right here, and you will need to fix it. Don't do that. The other thing, kind of hard to slot the arms into the shoulder sockets. Tweezers will make that a lot easier for you. So let's add her to the pram and call them good. Okay, I found out the easiest way to do this was to put the pram on the base first and then glue the Nanny to the base as well as into the handles. Another thing of note, the pinky finger on this arm is actually a part of the handle here, so use that as a guide. The one thing you want to do, though, is put the pram as far towards the edge of the base as possible because Nanny's hanging off of it. Alright, all done. Philip and the Nanny is completed. Hardest parts were the wheels, really, and the arms on the Nanny, getting them aligned. Being really careful around that lollipop also was just a little bit of difficulty, trying not to cut off the connection point or just lose it because it's a small bit. Overall, not nearly as bad as the Necrotic Machine, though. Alright, let's work on some minions. Our Rabble Risers. Not too difficult. We've got 1, 2, 3 on their lovely columns. I appreciate the spacing. Anyways, let's start with our first one. So let's grab the torso and put the legs on, followed by the head. No, we'll do right arm, left arm, and then the head. And then this cape and sheath situation is the cape is going to fit onto the back of the torso. And this hole right here will actually line up with another hole on the back. And then the sheaths will go through both holes and sort of staple them together. All right? So let's grab C4, and then C1. C4, add C1, two of them combined. Let's look at the back. See, that's pretty nice and flush. Yeah. Okay, now let's do our arms. Our right arm is going to be C6, and then our left arm is going to be C2. Okay. There's D6. Make sure this is nice and flat. This will be connection point for the cape. Seam looks pretty good. So let's move on to, sorry, not D, C6. Now let's move on to C2. Okay, this connection was really confusing and difficult. You can see how it is now. We really want to make it match the render on the back of the box. But if you look at the back, that's how it's supposed to go. I think the best point of reference is this is pretty smooth right here. Again, going to be a connection point for the cape. But also just make sure that the shoulder is as forward as possible and you don't see any seam down here in the armpit. Okay. The head is C7. Let's do that. Okay, C7 went in. Check the seam on the neck. Looks fine on both sides. Focus camera, please. Okay, C3 is going to be our big old cape. It's going to go across all of his back. And remember, the big hole in the cape is going to fit over this hole in the back. Okay, cape is on. Let's look at it from all angles. It's looking good. Okay, now let's just jam the sheaths in the hole. Alright, we're all done. Put them on a base. Rabble Riser #1 is done. We're going to call him Hacking Harry. And I realize that his foot is not flat on the ground. Yeah, it's solidified. I'm not going to accidentally break the legs trying to fix it. It's all one piece, so it wasn't due to a poorly assembled model. It was just obviously holding it upright or something when that glue cured. But anyways, the hardest part was the left shoulder. Figuring out how that went in was a bit of a puzzle. But, again, the render really saved me on that, and putting the cape on there really solidified it. So that was the hard part. Still pretty easy. And the hardest model for the minions. Let's do our second one. Second, Rabble Riser. We will start with the body, D4, and the top of the chest, D6. Do the right arm, D3, the left arm, D1, the sheath the left arm is holding, D2, and finish with the head, D5. Let's grab D4 and D6 first. D4 plus D6. Now let's do what was the right arm? D3, the right arm. There's the arm. Let's check the shoulder on all sides. Alright, D1 is going to be our left arm. Okay, there's D1, and I'm now realizing that his hand has just been cut off, and he's not holding the sheath at all. I misunderstood the instructions. The sheath, however, is going to go back here on his back hip. That would be D2. Sheath is good. Went in easy. Now let's do D5 the head. And head is on. Okay, let's base him, call him good. Rabble Riser number 2 is done. We're going to call this one Gouging Gary. Hardest part is the head. The neck, it's just a weird connection. Yeah, it's really just the head, and that wasn't even that hard. Well, pretty easy, and I still think the next one's going to be even easier, so... Yeah, let's move on. Our final Rabble Riser is the easiest one. Hooray! We start with E1, then we will add... we always start with the right, so E2, the right arm, then E4, the left arm, and E3, the sheaths. Let's go! Here's E1 now. E2, the right arm. Yeah, looking good. Now, E4, the left arm, the one holding the sword. Left arm is in. One thing to keep in mind, the strap should flow very nicely from on the chest to the strap that's over the shoulder. But anyways, we have one bit left. The sheath. And they go in, again, without much pain. Alright, base them. We're done with the box. Rabble Riser number 3 is done. We're going to call this one Stabbing Steve. Hard part was the left arm, because I dropped it once. That's it. Super easy. Let's look at the whole box. And just like that, we've completed the Molly Core box. A1 Molly Squidpiddge, the Necrotic Machine, or Ponto, Philip and the Nanny, and 1, 2, 3 Rabble Risers. I think it was pretty obvious the majority of the difficulty lied in Ponto, the Necrotic Machine, and a little bit of difficulty with Philip the Nanny's wheels and the Nanny's arms, and Molly's one hair bit, but that's it. At least the bits of note that were difficult. Yeah, I don't think I got anything else, so... I have been your foreman, Douglas Scoundrels, helping you build a better Malifaux. Enjoy your adorable zombies.